If you're serving on the Enterprise, you might be in for disaster, at least when it comes to getting infected with a virus that lowers inhibitions and makes everyone act out in un-Starfleet-like ways. In both the original series and the Next Generation, this deadly virus circulates throughout the crew, but all turns out well in the end, despite all odds. In this live stream, we compare and contrast The Naked Time with The Naked Now, and we answer the question, which series did it better? Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Savage Stream, the weekly live stream where we talk all things Star Trek. And today, I am super excited to start a series I'm calling Double Take, where we talk about shows that have been done twice, like the same story, but in different Star Trek series. So today we're talking about a story that was done in TOS in an episode called The Naked Time, and then it was copy-pasted in TNG in an episode called The Naked Now. And they were pretty similarly paced in their location as well. So I think The Naked Time was episode 4 or 5 or something like that. And The Naked Now was like episode 3. So they were both kind of like, welcome to this show. And here's what we want to lead with, which I think is so fun and so interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to give a little bit of a breakdown of each of the episodes. And I'll just kind of go through what I remember from each of them. And then we will kind of judge each episode on 3 different criteria or categories. The first is going to be set deck. So the kind of the sets, the decoration, the atmosphere, the ambiance that was created by some of these creatives who were kind of off screen. The second is going to be the character development. What do we learn about the crew members or their interactions, especially keeping in mind that both of these episodes happen extremely early in season 1. So these are kind of an establishing episode for us to figure out how are these crew members related to one another. And then the third category is going to be plot, just the basic storyline. Which storyline was better from beginning to end? Now, of course, it's a copy paste. So they're both the same story, but they both went in slightly different directions, which I definitely want to get into. So if you're watching live, hello and welcome. If you're watching on the replay, hello and welcome. If it makes sense, I'll put some timestamps in. So if you're watching on the replay, you can skip ahead at any time. Okay, before getting started with the first breakdown, I saw some of the comments in the chat that were really funny. One of them, which is this true? Hold on, not that one. Is this one? Is this true, Robert, that this was the most dialogue Sulu had ever had in any episode? Because that is wild. And I'm sure you don't mean just the scene where he was sword fighting, but like he talked a lot during this episode. If that's true, then that is wild. Okay. Let's go to, we're already getting some votes in the chat of which one is better, but we haven't done the categories yet. We got to do the categories and then do the final decision. So let's start with a breakdown of our first episode. Season 1, Episode 4, The Naked Time. The Enterprise crew becomes infected by a strange substance picked up on a dying planet which lowers their inhibition and causes erratic, dangerous behavior. As the Enterprise begins spiraling towards the planet's surface, Kirk and Spock manage to regain control just in time, using an experimental cold start of the engines that unexpectedly sends the ship back in time. Okay, so there was a lot going on in this episode. So for those of you who've been around for a while, you probably know this. And for the new people, this is new information. But I grew up watching TNG, and I totally fell in love with it. Fell in love with Voyager. Absolutely loved it. Did not love Enterprise. I didn't make it through the first season. And then that was the end of my Star Trek journey until all these reboots with Picard and Discovery and Lower Decks and Prodigy and all the things. Strange New Worlds. So what I had not watched in the past was the original series, and I'm throwing TAS in there. I'm throwing the animated series in the original series. I hadn't seen either of those. I'd seen maybe I don't know, an episode or something, but it doesn't really count. And then I had not seen Deep Space Nine. So recently, at the time of this recording, I finished watching all of Deep Space Nine all the way through. I'd only seen a couple of episodes back in the day, didn't really remember them. And that was such a joy and such a delight. So then I said, okay, let's go and watch TOS from beginning to end. And then, of course, next it will be Enterprise. So I am halfway through season 1. And I kind of jumped around, and Naked Time is one that I skipped because I was like, oh, I've seen this. I saw Naked Now. So I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to watch a couple others that look interesting, and then I'll kind of come back. And because it's episodic, doesn't matter. Like, you can jump around. When I jumped back around and watched The Naked Time, I was so surprised at how different it was. Same idea. It's a virus that lowers inhibitions and makes everybody act wackadoo, but the execution was so extremely different. So for those of you who haven't seen it, or just for a reminder, I did just do that little video, but I want to point out a couple more things. So in the beginning, there's a dying planet, and there were, I think, colonists on the planet doing research or something, and they lost contact with them. So the Enterprise was sent to check it out to see what was going on. So Spock and this other dude, whose name I totally forget, so if you remember, drop it in the comments. But Spock and other dude go down on the away team, and they're just kind of looking around, and that's when they find all the frozen bodies, which is the same thing we saw in Naked Now. So they see all the frozen bodies, and they're seeing like, oh, this person died from phaser fire. This person just like froze to death. And they're like, man, this is so... everybody was acting really weird. What's going on? So then they split up at one point. Sure, that's a thing they do in Trek. And other guy, they're wearing full-on hazmat suits because they know that there's a contaminant somehow. I don't know how they know this, but they know there's some kind of contamination on the planet. So they're wearing full-on hazmat suits. Future hazmat suits, which are everything. Like, I'm a scientist in the background, so I loved seeing the hazmat suits, and I love that they're all like red. Anyways, so they're in the full-on hazmat suits, and random dude is like, for some reason, pulls off his glove, which is part of his personal protective equipment that is there for a reason, but he pulls off his glove and then starts touching things. And as he reaches over to touch this pillar, this liquid, maybe it's supposed to be blood. It is red and kind of like juicy like blood. So I don't know. Let's say it's blood. Starts dripping from this wall, but because it's, future times and space and they want you to know it's weird, it starts dripping up. Like, it drips up onto his fingers. He doesn't feel it. It drips all over his hand. And then it just like instantly absorbs into his skin, which is wild and horrifying and gross. So what he does next is he doesn't feel any of the dripping or any of the liquid splattering all over his hand. He doesn't feel that. He doesn't feel the absorption, but he picks up his hand and he's like, he feels something in it, like it's tingling or something. So the first thing he does is he sniffs his hand, because that's a thing people do. And then he's like, well, smells good to me. So he puts his glove back on. And as he's readjusting the glove, Spock comes around the corner and he's like, all right, we've finished our mission. Everybody's dead. We don't know how, but we haven't been contaminated. Beam us back up. And the other, random dude's like, and they beam back up, but he has been infected by blood. I still don't know what this is. He's been infected by something. And, okay. So then the episode takes kind of a dark turn. He starts getting really, like angry and paranoid and irritable and just like kind of loses his mind a bit. He just starts getting really aggressive. They are sitting in, their cafeteria. Does their cafeteria have a name? I don't think so. Does it have a name? Maybe it does. Mess hall, cafeteria. I don't know. They're sitting in their cafeteria. So he's there, and then Sulu comes in, and then the person who sits next to Sulu. What's that person called? Because I think Sulu's like the pilot or something. So the other dude, the comms, I don't know. The other guy. They both come in and they're like, hey dude, what's going on? And they sit down or whatever. But this guy, he's like so angry. He's angry that they're sitting. He's angry that they're talking to them. So he picks up a knife. Mind you, it's a butter knife, which I think is so funny. Like, I wonder if that was something about TV back then, that it had to be a butter knife, that it had to be like a non-lethal weapon because they didn't want kids getting the wrong idea. I don't know. But instead of using a real knife as a prop, like a sharper knife as a prop, it was a butter knife. So he pulls out a butter knife and he's like, you better stay away. Otherwise, I'll butter you to death. And then they wrestle with the knife. And then somehow he falls on the knife. And then he dies. He totally dies. And here's the thing. When he dies, the doctor is like, oh, the only reason he died is because he lost the will to live. He was like, oh, I repaired all the damage. And the damage was apparently extensive from this one little butter knife stab was apparently extensive, because in another scene, we see Chapel and McCoy like over with their like surgery suits on, and they have all these tools out and equipment for, I don't know what all they need to repair inside of him. He looks like a human, so I don't know if he has extra organs going on that maybe he's not really a human. But anyways, he's like, I repaired the damage. I don't know what's wrong. And you see his vitals just going down and down and down. And then he just dies. So he died from like a very non-lethal butter knife stab, but because of his like bad feelings or something like that. So it starts out pretty dark. You're like, oh my gosh, this virus is going to like make people, want to end themselves or something like that. No, it's not. Because the next person it infects does something totally different. It's random dude who sits next to Sulu. Let's see, did anybody see that guy's name? No. Okay, so whoever that guy is, the way it affects him is he just starts singing some old like shanty, and he won't stop singing it. So he disappears from the bridge, goes to engineering, he locks out everyone because you can fly the Enterprise from any panel, right? We all know this. We can fly the Enterprise from any panel on the entire ship, and especially engineering, because that's where the engine is. But if you have the right lockout codes, you can fly this ship from anywhere. In addition, we also all know the ship can pretty much fly itself. So why it needs pilots, I don't know. Anyways, this dude goes to engineering, locks out the bridge, gives all the controls for himself, and calls himself the captain and starts singing these shanties, but he sings it over the comms, like over the loudspeaker, incessantly, over and over and over the same song. And he's like, one more time, and it is driving Kirk and Uhura crazy. And they have also been infected, because at this point everyone's been infected. And Kirk is like, shut that off, why don't you shut it off? And Uhura's like, if I could shut it off, don't you think I would shut it off? And they're just like snapping at each other. So you're like, okay, so there is, this virus makes people really depressed, but also it makes them also want to sing, but also it makes them irritated. Okay, there's a lot of things going on. So then Spock gets the virus, and he gets it from Chapel. When he goes to visit Chapel to see how, I skipped Sulu. When Sulu gets the virus, he starts flying around and trying to like stab people with this rapier, because he was talking earlier about how sword fighting is so elegant or something like that, how it's so cool and elegant and special, whatever. So he gets it in his head that he's some kind of pirate. I'm not really sure who he thinks he is, but what I am sure of is he rips his shirt off, goes down the halls, and starts chasing people with this sword, with this really thin sword. So, I mean, again, I'm watching it, I'm like, what is going on? Now, mind you, I've seen Naked Now, so I know the virus, like we always, on the TNG podcast, which is the podcast I hosted with one of my best friends, we called it the drunk virus, right? So it's like, okay, this is the drunk virus. But, like, who does this when they get drunk? Who does all of it? Maybe the shanties? Maybe the irritability? But, like, all of these things I wouldn't call it the drunk virus in this particular case, in TOS. Because it's not making everybody just act inhibited. What Spock supposes is happening is that it is bringing out people's suppressed identities, which is really interesting. Because it's one thing to just say you're not inhibited. So maybe you're more rude than you normally would be. Maybe you're more loud than you would normally be. But in this case, what they're saying this virus is doing is that it's bringing out some part of each person that they don't want other people to see. Some repressed part, some suppressed part. Specifically. So in the case of random dude one who was sniffing his hand, what it brought out of him was this like depression and this angst and this anger. That was something he was suppressing. What it brought out of Sulu was his inner sword fighter, apparently. What it brought out of random dude who sits next to Sulu was just this amazing karaoke singer. What it brought out of Chapel was her undying love for Spock. This was so out of the blue. So I've also, by the way, watched all of Strange New Worlds, and the Spock and Chapel thing was a thing for far, far, far too long. But in seeing that, I was like, okay, I wonder what this was like in TOS. Was this like an ongoing affair between the two of them? Was there a relationship? Was there just some, did Chapel secretly want to be like, what was going on back then? And I don't know if this happens again. Let me know in the chats. But so far in all of season 1, this was the one time that anything would suggest that there was anything between the two of them to make something out of for Strange New Worlds. And I was like, what do you guys, was this true? Do you think it's true that Chapel was really in love with Spock and that was a thing she was trying to suppress with all of her might and the virus brought it out? Do you believe that? Because like, this is episode 4. And I've seen no evidence of that in episodes 1 through 3. Well, 1 being the cage. So in episodes 2 and 3, I had not seen any evidence that Chapel had a secret, undying love for Spock in TOS. So this felt really out of the blue to me. And she was like, I love you. I'm in love with you. I don't know why. And she's like touching his hands and all of this. That's how Spock gets it. And then it makes Spock really, I want to say it makes him cry really hard. I don't know what the emotion is exactly underneath the cry really hard. It makes him just, I guess, lose control of his emotions, which is the whole thing, right? Because he suppresses everything. So a lot of what's coming to the surface is tears, but tears could be all of the things. It could be overwhelm and fear and like all the things. It could be all the things kind of bubbling up at once. And we get to see him just like backhand Kirk, which was so, I laughed out loud at that scene. I was like, what just happened? Because Kirk kept smacking Spock and he was like, smack, 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 smack. Shake out of it, Spock. Smack, smack. Like he just kept smacking him and smacking him and smacking him. And then Spock hit him back and he goes flying across the room. And it was just great. It was great. So the virus in TOS is a virus that actually brings out, I won't say the worst in people, but it brings out a side of people that they would prefer others not see. And as they're trying to figure all this out, Kirk is like, smack, 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 Spock, we need to figure this out. We need to figure this out. We need to get out of here alive. At this point, Scotty is not infected. And like the two guys working with him, they're cool. They're good. Apparently the whole rest of the ship is, though. So they're trying to break into engineering so that they could get control of the ship because, and I missed this part, that planet that they were surveying, the planet where everybody else had died, is about to like explode or something like that. So if they don't move the ship quickly, the ship will also be destroyed. And by quickly, I think it's like 12 minutes. They have 12 minutes to save their lives. So they're like, we've got to do something. We got to figure it out. And now the engines are cool and we need to do a cold start. And Spock's like, it's never been done. It's never been done. And Kirk's like, I don't want to hear it's never been done. I want us to do it. Anyways, they end up doing it. It works. The cold start engine technique is successful. It jumps the entire ship into warp instantly, and they go far, far, far away from the planet. So they're not sucked into the implosion or blown apart by the explosion or whatever's supposed to happen to this planet when a planet dies on the show. And you're like, wow, what a relief. They were saved just in the nick of time. I think it was like 30 seconds to go. Then Kirk is like, where are we? I forget who he asked, but he's like, check the star date or the maps or something and find out where we are. And somebody's like, oh, we're like far away from that where we were, but we're also 3 days in the past. When I tell you this scene, I had this moment where I was like, is this like Superman, where he flies around the planet really fast and he goes back in time? I was like, is that what's going to happen? And then when they were like, yes, we've gone back in time, I was like, oh, that's probably where Superman got this idea, where that, people who wrote that movie got this idea, which is so fun. But anyways, so they went back in time, and then I was like, okay, so now they're back in time. What are they going to do with this time? Now they're 3 days in the past, and we still have more minutes left of this episode. So are they going to try to save the colonists who died on that planet? Are we going to get some kind of temporal paradox situation? Are they going to save the dude who fell on his knife from the planet? Like, what are we going to do? Because at this point, Dr. McCoy has found an antidote. So, and he's like going around and inoculating people. So I was wondering what they were going to do at the time. Well, I guess they didn't do anything because the episode just ended there. They didn't say what they did. They didn't say what they did with the time. Spock suggested, hey, we could go anywhere, do anything. And Kirk was like, yes, but maybe another day. Dun, 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 dun. And it just went off. And I was like, well, why did they even introduce that possibility if they were not going to explore it? I don't have the answer to this. Then another part of this episode that I thought was delightful was when McCoy is inoculating everybody. He's injecting them all with the cure. Kirk walks under the bridge, and instead of giving a hypospray in like his neck or his arm or something, he just rips his shirt off so that we can see his pecs, and then he injects him like right in his arm. And I laughed out loud at that because I was like, can you imagine you going for your flu shot, and instead of your doctor just like giving you an injection in your arm or in some reasonable location, they just rip your shirt and then jab you in the arm, like in the shoulder? That was just, I don't know, it was just so funny and so ridiculous. And I was like, there must be something in oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on William Shatner. There must be something in William Shatner's contract for season 1 where he has to show his body at least once an episode, every episode. Because I think I got like 13 episodes in and I was like, wow, they're still finding reasons to just like have a shirt rip off or tear, or he has to take it off because he's sweaty or needs to go in the shower or wants to go to the gym, or he's fallen down really hard and his entire shirt has ripped off. Like, it's just hilarious. So that's our first episode. And now we're going to contrast with the second episode. But before we do that, I want to check the chat and hear your thoughts. Okay, I am seeing a lot of stuff in the chat. This is great. Sela says, I love the TOS environmental suits. Those were so cool. I also love those. Kevin says, the naked time is better because it had less Wesley. I love Wesley. Although he was super irritating in this episode, in the naked now. But I do love me some Wesley. PS2 Chipper says, there's no such thing as a small role, only small actors. Yeah. Okay. So Robert says the rattle sound in Naked Time versus the virus transfer makes me shiver. Yeah. In Naked Time and in Naked Now, they have a sound. In Naked Time, they have like a rattling sound every time the virus is passed, and in Naked Time and in Naked Now, they have like a sizzling sound every time the virus is passed. Now, I saw Naked Now before, like I saw the TNG episode before the TOS episode, and I was like, why are they making a sizzling sound? That is so random. And then when I watched this episode, I was like, oh, that's why. And they were just copy and pasting. They were like, we need a sound, and for whatever reason, they couldn't make the same sound, I suppose. Oh, that's interesting. Randall says that in syndication, the part of Kirk seeing scribbles like Jesus saves is gone. Yeah, I didn't see that on Paramount Plus. I mean, I wasn't trying to read the scribbles, but I didn't see that. I don't even remember what they said, but I feel like that would have stuck in my mind. Exactly. I need to take the hazmat off because I have to scratch my nose. It's like, no, dude, leave your hazmat on. Leave it on. Leave it on. Hey, Dustin. Yes, you got to keep your PPE on. Major OSHA violation, especially when you're dealing with a contaminated location. 1960s medicine. It was it was a phaser edged butter knife with instant toast function. That's funny. That's some red shirt stuff. Did he have a red shirt? Probably. He totally did not need to die for any reason. That was so unnecessary. They also had the hand throttle on the Enterprise. Are you talking about in the are you talking about on the ship to like stop it? Like, did they stop it with emergency brakes? Or are you talking about the little thing they push on in the turbo lift? Riley is the goat. Is Riley the one who died with the butter knife, or is Riley the one who sits next to Sulu? Which one is Riley? Okay, loved Riley. So Riley's one of those two. Is Riley the one who was singing? That's right. He was singing "I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen," and it was so bad. It was like it was so bad. It was definitely karaoke level. Uhura reports him with a sword, but it's more like a foil or a rapier. Yes. But like if I saw somebody running at me with that, I would have said sword. I wouldn't have been like, someone is chasing me with a rapier. Like I would have said sword, right? Chapel was absolutely in love with Spock, but it was mostly unrequited. Okay, but was it more than this one episode is what I need to know. Since I've only seen this episode where there was any hint of any attraction between them, but she was under the influence in that moment. Are there any other episodes where you're like, oh yeah, Chapel's totally in love with Spock? Thanks, Jim. I needed that. They were treating the Enterprise like an old Ford Explorer, using a good old cold start. That's right. The view screen of the planet, yes, the view screen of the planet has a planet spinning like crazy. It has a planet spinning like crazy, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to mean that the planet is coming closer, or I know it means danger, right? The faster it spins means, oh, the planet's about to be destroyed. It's about to implode something. And maybe bigger was because the Enterprise was getting closer to the ship. I don't know. I'm not sure what the special effects, half the time I don't know what the special effects are trying to say. But they're just cool that they tried. I'm sure that Shatner improvised that scene. It was a no-no to ruin the set's wardrobes. Interesting. Well, then he wouldn't have improvised. It would have been McCoy who ripped the shirt. So maybe he said, I think it'll be better if someone just rips my shirt off. So funny. Yeah, not that scene from Galaxy Quest where Alan Rickman says, I see you've managed to take your shirt off. Makes more sense. Oh, so Windgrace, literally so many things about TOS makes Galaxy Quest make more sense. Not only that, but also, do you remember that scene where Tim Allen's like rolling unnecessarily through the desert and everyone else is just walking calmly behind him and they're like rolling their eyes and Sigourney Weaver's like, you lost your gun. And he's like, oh man, like while he was rolling on the ground. There was an episode where Kirk was doing that exact roll from rock to rock. And I was like, that's where he got it from. Like he nailed it. He did the exact roll that Kirk did. And it just made Galaxy Quest so much better. One of the only times TNG did it worse. Usually when tropes get recycled, they get better. Okay, so Riley's the one who was singing. Riley is the vocalist. Okay. It was funny as a kid. The shirt is ripped, then he gets the injection. Doesn't change his face. It was so silly and so funny. Yes, Data's hookup was legendary. On that note, let's look at the second episode. Season 1, Episode 3, The Naked Now. A mysterious infection spreads from another Federation ship to the crew of the Enterprise, lowering inhibitions and causing erratic behavior among the crew. Somehow, Wesley saves the ship from destruction, and Beverly creates an antidote, all while being intoxicated. So I just gave you this whole play-by-play of all the things that happens in The Naked Time. The Naked Now is much more muted and contained. So similarly, there is some kind of distress call, or maybe there's not a distress call. Maybe it's because this science vessel just has gone dark, like no one's heard from them in a while. I don't totally remember how it started, but this science vessel is adrift, and the Enterprise comes upon it to try to figure out what happened. So they send an away team, which I know maybe it was just Geordi. I don't know who else went. I think it was just Geordi. Send an away team. So Geordi's walking around and he just sees all the frozen bodies, and it's the same idea where they're like, all these people seem to have died in really strange and reckless ways. And there are people who are frozen to death because they just didn't turn the heat up in their quarters. And then they get the like the black box from that ship to listen to the last logs, like the captain's last logs before she was sucked out of an airlock or something. And everybody's just like giggling and laughing, and they're just being ridiculous. And the captain is like, for some reason, they have an airlock on the bridge, and you hear the captain joking with the rest of the crew, and she's like, what does this button do? Let's all see what happens when we click it. And they like all get sucked out of an airlock, and Picard et al. Are listening to this recording, and they're just like, what the heck? What is going on? What could have happened? So they're trying to figure out why these people were acting so odd and why they all basically destroyed themselves. And there also was like phaser fire and things like that too. In the meantime, Geordi has gotten infected by being on this other ship. And when he transported back to the Enterprise, the biofilters did not screen it out, which actually makes a lot of sense because McCoy said this back in TOS, and I'm sure someone said it at some point in TNG, if not in this episode. Those transporters are supposed to filter out any contaminants. They're supposed to filter out bacteria and viruses that are harmful and all these things, all these harmful contagions. However, if the filter is not programmed for that thing, it can't filter out that thing. So it's really easy to get other things in, things that it hasn't been programmed for, like in this case where this virus got through the buffer. So he comes on board, he's got this virus, and for some reason on Geordi, it just makes him sweat a lot. It just makes him really hot. And he just walks around going, I'm hot. Oh, I'm so hot. And like touching people and being really hot. And every time he touches people, there's like a little sizzling sound. So as he's going around trying to figure out what the heck is going on with him. Oh, and shout out to PS2 Chipper, who's just gifted 5 memberships to the channel. So if you're not a channel member, this is your chance. Grab them while they're hot, because I think there is a time limit on those. Anyways, so he's going around touching people, and the sizzling sound is going, and everyone's getting infected. And then he just starts acting really weird, and someone's like, dude, why don't you go to sickbay? Because you don't seem well. So he's like, okay, fine. So he goes to sickbay, and he's kind of like just kind of spiraling out into sickbay. Mostly it makes him, I don't know, mostly it just makes him kind of foggy-headed, and he's not really a danger to himself. I don't recall him picking up a butter knife to do anyone any damage. So he goes to sick bay, and Dr. Crusher's trying to work on him. And of course, while she's trying to work on him, she gets infected too. So everyone's getting infected. Basically, what we see is that everyone who gets infected gets kind of just thirsty for someone else on the ship. So Beverly is like, I need Picard. Like, I have to have him. And Troy is like, I need Riker. I have to have him. And Yar is like, I need Data. I have to have him. And the funny thing, though, about the Troy and Riker is like, this is the one time when Riker's like, I'm good. Right? Troy's like, hey, you remember how we were kind of an item before? What do you think about rekindling that old flame? And Riker's like, no, I'm good. This is like the one time when he's just totally unaffected by the virus that he was born to have. When we were recording the TNG podcast, my co-host joked and said that he's infected with this drunk virus all the time already. So of course it had no effect on him. But literally throughout the whole episode, he never gets it. Even when Troy is pushed all up on him, I don't think we hear a sizzling sound, but if we do, it does nothing to him. He's totally fine the whole episode. Picard does get infected, but he's barely affected. Like he feels attracted to Beverly more than usual, but that's about it. It doesn't really harm the way he's like his thoughts, his ability to lead the ship, which is impressive and weird because everybody else, they just like go off their rockers. So it infects Yar, and then Yar hooks up with Data, and she comes out wearing that beautiful outfit, This is another thing I did not know before watching TOS, that outfit comes straight from TOS. I did not know that. I thought they invented that look for this episode, but then I was watching some episode, of TOS, and I was like, oh, that's the same exact outfit. They literally copy and pasted even the look, but she looks amazing in it. She looks so cute, except for the weird squiggle. She looks so cute. So she hooks up with Data. She infects Data because apparently his positronic net is also susceptible to this drunk virus. So now he's all loopy and drunk, and he's like, woo! So the two of them have a thing. Wesley gets infected. Thankfully, they keep his purity as a child clear, and don't have him fall for some like young cadet or something like that, at least not in this episode. So instead, when he gets drunk, he just goes to engineering and just starts screwing around with everything. This ship is also in peril. In this case, there's this nearby star that exploded, and there's a fragment of the star that's coming towards them, and it's going to destroy them in, I don't know. I don't actually remember how many minutes this one was. Maybe this was also 12 minutes. But there is the science vessel with all the frozen people, and then there's the Enterprise, and the fragment is coming right towards both of them. So at the last second, Beverly does come up with a cure, which isn't that hard because it's already in the database because McCoy already made this cure. And then she goes and starts injecting people. While she's doing that, Data comes down to engineering, puts all the isolinear chips back. They're able to move the ship slightly out of the way. That fragment destroys the other ship, which is fine because no one was on it, and just kind of goes off into space. And they're able to jump out of the way just in time. Now, in the TNG version, the ship does not jump back in time. It doesn't go to warp 1,000. It just kind of skips out of the way a little bit, and then everybody's safe. Beverly injects everybody, and everything goes back to normal. And the only awkwardness is between Yar and Data on Yar's side, because now she feels embarrassed about hooking up with him. So she just says, look, it never happened. And Data's like, understood. Although he doesn't really understand, but he knows he's supposed to say it never happened. That's kind of the only fallout from this whole situation. Nobody died, which is much more positive than in TOS. But other than that, there's not as much drama and intrigue. Mostly it's just people hooking up with each other, like left and right and center. Okay, so I'm going to check the chat, and then I want to compare these two, go over our 3 criteria, and say who did it better. Who wore the episode better? Okay, PS2 Chipper says, there was a time when Shatner heard someone call the TOS actors has-beens from a toilet stall. That's where they got that scene from Galaxy Quest. Oh, really? I thought they just assumed that would be a thing that would happen from time to time. I have to invalidate this episode solely for Data. Weird design. If you prick me, do I not leak? That's funny and gross. Yes. The rare contagion that affects biological and technological beings. Yep, makes perfect sense to me. Let's see. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Will X affect Data? Flip a coin. Exactly. And that's the whole thing about Data, is the kind of the beauty and the downside of having Data is that he's impervious to most things. So the upside is Data can always save the day, but then the downside is Data can't always save the day, because then where's the drama? So now we have to have somebody turn Data off, or kidnap him, or somehow also be infected by this virus. Wingrace says, I love the creepy Picard grunt noise in this. I think it's funny. I don't know if I'd use the word love, but I do think it's funny. His when Beverly's like, Jean-Luc, I need you. Yeah, so weird. Yes, fully functional in multiple techniques, which he said here, Data said here in this episode, and then Data says again in the movie First Contact, just in case we forgot that he was fully functional, which, by the way, I didn't forget. This was such an iconic scene from this really goofy episode. Would have done better with Leffler. His neutrinos never drifted further than that day. His neutrinos never drifted. Wesley saves the day again with a repulsor beam. Yeah, Robin Leffler was so sweet. Okay, so we got some votes for TNG did it better. TOS did it better. Agreed. I generally prefer the original as opposed to remakes. The exception proves the rule. Yeah, sometimes, let's talk about it. Okay, so now we've gone over we've recapped the Naked Time and the Naked Now. And I want to look at both of these episodes with 3 different categories. So the first one is set deck. The set decoration, just what are we seeing? So for both episodes, we do see quite a bit of things. We see a lot of different things. And we kind of need to, because there's some other place outside of the ship that has the infection. It's brought onto the ship, and then we need to see how it affects several characters. So we need to see it kind of moving through the ship. We can't just have this be one of those bottle episodes like Shades of Grey that happens entirely in sickbay, right? We do need to see a bit more than we might usually see in a typical episode. So in the TOS version, we see the dying planet. We only see one piece of it, but we only need to see one piece of it. We see the mess hall. We see the bridge. We see the hallway. We see engineering. We see sick bay. We also see just like random corridors, Jeffrey's tubes, and things like that people are climbing into or out of or spray painting. Turbo lift. I think those are all the places we see. In TNG, similarly, we see the vessel that's infected with all the frozen bodies. We see several rooms of that vessel. So we don't just see one thing. We see a couple different places. We see back on TNG, we are back on the Enterprise. We see the bridge, sick bay. I think we see the observation lounge. We see engineering. And then we see a random hallway and stuff like that. So it's pretty comparable. I don't think we see 10 forward. I don't recall seeing 10 forward. I also don't know when they introduced 10 forward. So they might not have even had that thought back here in this episode. In any case, if we're talking just set deck alone, they both look awesome. They both look amazing. I am here for it. The frozen bodies are legit. Like, I am assuming that they got people and painted them all white. Like, got people, put them in their underwear and painted them all white, or spray painted them with that like foam stuff, that insulation foam or whatever. That's what I'm guessing they did, because it didn't look like dummies or models. It looked like people that were laying still and then covered in foam, which is wild. Those looked amazing. Like, the sets looked really, really good as far as the frozen stuff. TOS had that really cool special effect. Effects is not a category because I didn't think that'd be fair. But TOS had that special effect, that really cool effect of having the virusy blood stuff drip upwards. I thought that was really cool. The set itself was kind of like whatever, but the hazmat suit, super cool. I would say if I'm comparing the two of them on which one had the better sec deck, I think I have to give it to TOS. And that's because the different things that we saw looked so remarkably different. Like, the mess hall was such a different environment and had a whole scene going on in the mess hall versus what was going on the bridge, which was so different from what was going on in sickbay, which was so different from what was going on in the hallway. I really felt like each area that they showed kind of had a purpose. It had a role to play in telling this story. In TNG, I felt like each set we saw, we were seeing the same kind of thing, but with different characters. We were seeing Troy being really thirsty for Riker in the hallway. We were seeing Geordi be really thirsty for Yar in the observation lounge. We were seeing Yar being really thirsty for Data in her quarters. We were seeing Beverly be really thirsty for Picard, like on the bridge. You know, it was kind of like, it felt like the same scene, but just switching out the characters and just putting them in different places in the ship. So it's like, stand here, look at each other, really want each other. Okay, now you two, stand here. You know what I mean? So I'm going to have to give that to TOS. What do you guys think, though? What do you guys think before I go to the next category? PS2 Chipper says, do you think Soong made a one-to-one copy down there, or do you think he added a few inches? I mean, even though Data and Lore look like Noonien Soong, I am of the opinion that he made them both to be better than human limitations and frailties. Even though he was saying, this is like Pinocchio, you know, I want to make a real boy and all of that, I think he made them better. Like, for example, Lore and Data are super strong. He didn't have to make them super strong. He could have given them the same amount of strength as a regular human. He didn't have to make their bones out of titanium or whatever they're made out of. I don't even know. He could have used a lighter, you know, like aluminum or something like that, right? So I think he made Lore and Data to be enhanced versions of humanity in all ways. Has many inches? I don't know the answer to that question. But my point in saying that is I don't think he was copying himself exactly. I think he was just taking his face as a model, but like the bodies didn't match, right? I think he was just kind of taking the idea of male person as a model and then enhancing them. Same way with what's the guy's name? Zimmerman. With Zimmerman, who made the EMH. He made the Doctor look like him, but the way the Doctor was totally different than how he was, right? So that's my guess. Poor random chief engineer. Lots of pipes. I thought the frozen bodies in the TNG version were convincing. Yeah, same. 10 forward doesn't come until season 2. Okay, that makes more sense. The aft lounge on the D in season 1 is the cheesiest Russo standard cruise ever. But I do feel like this episode is cheesy. Like, that's what this episode is on both shows. Super strong and super sexy. So yeah, I'm going to have to give it to TOS for the set deck because the set looks amazing. I do think the TNG frozen bodies are like perfectly done. But overall, I think it's much more interesting in TOS. Okay, the second category is character development. Kind of like what do we see about these characters? What do we learn about these characters? And like I said before, this is very early in season 1. So we're still getting to know these characters. We've only had 2 episodes that have aired, 1 or 2 episodes, depending on how you count it, that have aired at the time that we're seeing this. So this is still telling us how are these people related to one another. We don't have all the tried and true tropes that we will have later on. So in TOS, it sets up a lot of things that I don't know are super paid off. It sets up that the Chapel and Spock thing is going to be a thing, which so far has not become a thing. It sets up, I guess, Spock being secretly angry or sad or something. I don't know. They do talk a lot about his suppressed emotions, so I guess that does pay off. They switch a lot of the bridge. I've noticed this on TOS. It's like they switch the person sitting next to Sulu each episode, depending on whatever the plot is. So in that sense, we never get to, like, at least so far for season 1, we don't really get to know that person because that person keeps changing. But I think it's really smart because it makes the episodes more fun because that person becomes a little more disposable, right? You can send them on away missions or like they can take over the bridge or whatever, and they don't have to really face those consequences the next time because we're just gonna have a new person sitting right there. I feel like the TOS version was a lot less heavy on the interdynamics of the crew, and it was more individualized, right? It was like Riley is just like, I want to sing shanties, and Sulu's like, I want to fight with a rapier. You know, it was more like whatever these people are kind of popping off and doing, versus the TNG version where everything seemed really paired off and connected, and everything was about sex. So everything seemed more focused, and because of that, I think all of that is stronger as far as character development for what we're going to see later. Because now we're like, okay, Troy and Riker, we saw that in the pilot season in Encounter at Farpoint, that they had some, you know, they were making googly eyes at each other, or Troy was making googly eyes at Riker, and Riker was staring impassively back. So this is kind of a continuation of that. We do have the Yar and Data hookup, which they never, ever reference again, as far as like, we don't see anything romantic between them again. But after Yar dies, Data has that like hologram of her, and he like looks at it and he thinks of her a lot and all of that. And I always tie that back to this moment, and I think it's just really sweet and precious. So that becomes a thread. Picard and Beverly, did we know that they were into each other in the first episode? I think so. I think we knew that they knew each other. We knew they had a past. We knew he didn't like Wesley. I think we knew that there was some kind of attraction there in the first episode, but this is where they ramp it up a lot, and then they ramp it way back down. They ramp it way back down unless one of them is infected by something, their mind has been taken over, they're really an alien posing as them. Those are the only times, again, where we see them have any kind of romantic chemistry between now and like season 7. So it does become more of a thread. So all that to say, from the character development standpoint, I have to say that I have to give it to TNG, because TNG has more. Whatever it sets up here is something that continues on in other episodes, at least so far. So I'm going to check the chat, and then we'll go to our third category, and our last category in the competition. So Dustin says, give it to TOS again. The only thing we learn is that Wesley is smart, and his mom is hot for the captain, which never pays off until season 3 of Picard. We do learn a lot about Wesley being smart. I'm trying to think if we knew that about him in previous episodes. But I feel like that's another point for TNG, though, because Wesley being smart is a thing. Like, that is a thing that saves the ship multiple times throughout all of season 1. So that is something that keeps coming back and keeps coming back. The on-again, off-again attraction between Picard and Crusher, and Beverly's recurring attempts to tell Jean-Luc how she feels about him. Yes, that is... or Picard trying not to tell her how he feels about her. I don't get that. I don't understand that. And they have breakfast together every day. Like, what's going on? What are y'all doing? That was so frustrating to me as a kid watching this show. Nobody likes Wesley. I like Wesley. Picard definitely did not like Wesley. That relationship parallels the unrequited love Nurse Chapel has for Spock. See, this is the thing that I don't know. Like, how long does that unrequited thing last for? PS2 Chipper says TNG had better screen sharing. Do you mean there were more different? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by better screen sharing? Do you mean that characters each had more time on screen than in the TOS version? Wesley's smart. He can make us go. Yeah, Wesley can totally fly the ship. He can absolutely make us go. Okay, our last category is the plot, just like the storyline itself. And obviously this is a copy paste. So the big idea is virus comes on board, people act wacky, Enterprise is almost destroyed, somehow crew saves the day and escapes. That's like the big plot. But if we get down into some of the more weeds, into the details of what's going on in each episode, which one has a better plot? So I think it's pretty obvious where I stand from how long I took to describe what was going on in the Naked Time versus how long I took to describe what was going on in the Naked Now. But I think this one easily goes to TOS, easily for me. And that's because even though the plot was tighter for TNG, like it was much more straightforward, there was less extraneous things, I also think it was less interesting. It was like, okay, there's a bunch of frozen bodies. That's crazy. And then when Geordi gets back on the ship, it's just like, okay, Geordi's really hot. Now everybody's really horny. Now Wesley's acting up. Data saves the day. Yay. But it's not as, so it's very tight. It's very concise. It's not confusing. And I do like plots that are clear. They're not trying to confuse you. However, it's just kind of, it's fine. Like, it's fine. It's not bad. It's not great. It's fine. But the TOS version had literally everything. It was like every time we switched to a new environment, I was like, what is going on? And I was here for it. It didn't feel confusing. It did feel a bit, maybe it was though. It did feel a bit like a smorgasbord. There was a lot of things going on, but each different piece I thought was so interesting. So it was like, oh my gosh, this guy has this virus and it's making him really irritable. Oh no, he died. He died from just not wanting to live. That's terrible. But then it's like, oh, now Nurse Chapel has the hots for Spock. Okay, I didn't see that coming. And then the scene where Leonard Nimoy is just like crying his eyes out as Spock, even though there was no actual tears and it was just him like, you know, going, I still felt for him. And that, like, again, that was like another emotional note of just like this despair and anguish. And then when he's talking to Kirk and he's like, my feelings of friendship towards you make me feel ashamed. It was like, oh, like, I don't know, that just like hit me in my heart to hear that he was ashamed of like the friendship that he feels for Kirk. So it was just a lot of emotional notes going through the plot. And it was kind of like a ping pong ball. Normally, this is the sort of thing that I'd be like, this is too much. And I don't like it. It's too much going on. I did not feel like that for the TOS episode. I was just like, this is great. And then we have Sulu, which was so hilarious, chasing people through the hallways and just every different part. It was like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And then at the end, I was like, we have like 4 minutes left in this episode. So how are they going to get away? I'm not seeing, every time they're going to get away, something happens where they can't get away. So I'm really like, how are they going to get away? And then when they get away and they get away 3 days into the past, I was like, that's probably the only part I didn't like, just because that felt unnecessary at this point. It would have been enough for them to just escape danger. It felt unnecessary to also say, we've traveled back in time 3 days, but we're not going to develop that. We're just going to let you know that that happened. And then in the episode, it was like, why not just say you escaped? Why do we have to have time travel? I don't know. That being said, I love the fact that they had time travel. And after watching it, I really wish that TNG would have gone further in that. I don't know how they would have. I don't know if it would have made the episode better or potentially worse. But instead of having an entire 42 minutes of everyone getting horny and then Wesley trying to destroy the ship, what if we had like less time on that and more time on the time travel or more time on the some of the like repercussions? I don't know, but maybe that wouldn't have saved it. So for me, I'm going to give it to TOS for the plot. I loved the like, I love the ups, the downs, the side to side. I was sad. I was happy. I was crying. I was laughing. Like, it was just all the things. And I was just here for it. It was such a fun episode, such a fun watch. I would definitely watch that episode again and again. Whereas Naked Now, I always skip. Like, I also like that episode a lot too, though. I think it's goofy. I think it's silly. I have a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings because when we reviewed it for the TNG podcast, we basically laughed for an entire hour at how dumb the episode was. So I have a lot of warm feelings towards that episode, but I actually enjoyed the TOS version. Like, I actually liked the episode. I would totally watch that again on a rewatch. And Naked Now is always an easy skip. Like, there's really nothing to see in that episode other than Data and Yar and be like, ooh, they hooked up, but there's really nothing else to see. So for me, TOS wins set deck, TNG wins character development, TOS runs plot, so TOS takes home the gold. But let me know what you think in the chat. I'm going to check the chat real quick, and then we will be done. Question: am I the only person in the world who likes the naked now? I like the naked now. But like I said, I like it for like the nostalgic feelings that I have. I don't know if I would like it out of that context. If I didn't have memories of just laughing hysterically while watching it and like, if I didn't have those, I don't know if I would enjoy it as much. But if you love the naked now, let us know in the chats so that Nadia does not feel alone. Patty says that TOS had more depth for the characters and TNG felt silly. I think that's interesting, Patty. I think they both felt pretty silly to me. But I think that TOS was silly and fun. It was like quirky, like everyone's different quirks. And I feel like TNG was silly and dumb. It was like silly and you're like, oh gosh, what are they going to do now? What are they going to do now? But it wasn't quirky. I didn't see anything special about Beverly that I didn't know before, or something special about, Geordi that I didn't like. I didn't know he, like the way we learned that Sulu is really into rapiers or that Riley's really into singing shanties. Like I didn't know any stuff like that. I didn't know any stuff like that. But yeah, I think they're both pretty silly and pretty awesome. Yeah, one of the things TOS runs into is having slightly too much time to fill and missed meandering. So I'm guessing that explains a lot, When Grace, because there are so many episodes where there's like something dramatic happening, right? Like the planet's going to explode, for example. And instead of them being like, oh my gosh, the planet's going to explode, and they show the planet and they're like, what are we going to do? Thoughts. And they show the crew going like, we could do this, we could do that, a la Discovery or Strange New Worlds or one of the newer New Trek shows where they do that right on the bridge. They just go options and everyone starts popcorning their options. Instead of that on TOS, they'll be like, oh no, the ship is going to be destroyed if we don't move. And then it'll show the view screen and it'll be like, dun, 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 dun. And then it'll show Kirk. And then it'll show the view screen, and then it'll show Kirk even closer, and then it'll show the view screen, and then it'll show Spock, and then it'll show Uhura, and then it'll show the view screen, and you're like, wait, are we still talking about the same thing? And there's like no options, and it just like keeps going, which is really funny. But I guess that's why maybe they just had more time on their hands than story. I like Phil Astor just put Data and Tasha. Nothing else to see. Whatever is season 1 Jonathan Frakes with no beard. Beautiful. It's season 1 Jonathan Frakes with no beard. I like Jonathan Frakes with the beard, though, with or without the beard. I think he is a beautiful man. Was it the Yar Data love scene that clinched it for you? That's a question to you, Nadia. Was that what tipped the scale? Says, I thought it was a bit awkward, but also funny. Yeah. It's kind of weird. Okay, so the movie Star Trek for the Voyage Home had time travel as well. So I feel like the hookup between Data and Yar was, I'm actually glad they did it. So I'm glad they did it because when they call back to it and stuff, I think it's really sweet. But I will say that in reading the TNG Bible, which is the director's guide, so this is what Gene Roddenberry wrote. Gene Roddenberry wrote for directors of Star Trek. At the time, it was just the original series, but then, it became like bread and butter for future. But when he was writing this, he wrote it for the directors so they would know kind of like where we're starting and where we're going with these characters. And there were some very specific descriptions about the interactions between different characters, who they were, what they looked like, things like that. You can get a copy on my website if you go to thetngpodcast.com, or you can just Google it. But one of the things where it says about Data specifically, a couple things. One is Data was supposed to be Asian. That was the original vision. Data was supposed to be of Asian descent. He was also supposed to be so human-like that you could not tell that he was an android. Like, he was supposed to look perfectly human, and you couldn't tell he was an android unless you did something, like unless you maybe opened up his positronic net or try to take blood from her. There was some caveat, like the only way to tell he's not human is like this one thing you can do. And then the other thing, so those are two things it said about Data. The other thing it said about Data was he is fully functional sexually. Like, that was very important to put that in. That's the only character in the entire director's Bible, the TNG Bible, that I read or that I remember that had anything to do with their sexual anatomy. Like Data had to be fully functional. So that was specifically written out there. So in this episode, this was like a fulfillment of that director's guide, of that TNG Bible. Like we have to put that in there so people know that Data is fully functional. Now, obviously, they dropped the Asian looking thing. They dropped the looks totally human, can't even tell he's android thing. And instead painted him with that gold paint that looks white. So he looks very android. They gave him the contacts where his eyes look green or whatever. So he looks more like an android. But I think what's really beautiful is in homage, I'm guessing it's in homage to this wish. When we get to Picard season 1, we have the character of Daj, I think that's her name, who's like Data's daughter, and she is of Asian descent, and she does look totally human. You can't tell she's an android, and I thought that was really cool. I don't know if that was like just happenstance or if they happened to read that and wanted to kind of like honor that first vision, but I thought that was really nice touch. There were other things in there too, like that Yar was best friends with Wesley, I think was in there. Like who was going to be friends with who was in there, who had a backstory with who used to hook up with who, like all of that was in there. Yes, I agree. Riley's singing drove me crazy as well. Okay, so Dustin says, DS9 Dramatis Personae is kind of their version of this, where everyone becomes suspicious of others and is so much better than both. You know what I thought you were going to say, Dustin? I thought you were going to say that episode where Luoxana is infecting everybody with like the horny virus. I thought you were going to say that was like this because I think that was like this. I would probably compare that one more with this than Dramatis Personae. And what was the name of that episode? I don't remember. Whatever the name of that episode was. I think that was like DS9's version of this, where there's like a horny virus instead of a drunk virus that's like flying all around, infecting everybody, and everybody wants to hook up with everybody. I think that episode of DS9 was also really silly and really funny. But again, I feel like even if I put that in the group of 3, I still would like the TOS better because it was very one note. It was everybody just getting really horny. There was like no other things that they did. So anyways, Gavin says the first half of season 1 of TNG was very rough. They were still trying to make a 60s show in the late 80s. Yep. Instead of just making an 80s show in the 80s. Did I make sound effects? Speaking of music, my hubby was saying the other day that TOS episode music sounds like old video game music. It totally does sound like old video game music, which I love. Ensign Babyface. Yes. Riker makes the beard work. Beard, no beard. I'm here for it. I don't know about this. You know, Data matches Sung 100%. Sung was clearly very proud of himself. Charisse does disagree. Charisse disagrees. Adding an ice cream or bowling scene might have helped the TNG episode. Adding an ice cream or a bowling scene. We did have ice cream with Wesley and the Dauphin, the like princess ruler of the other planet, but I don't remember having any bowling. Maybe we haven't had bowling yet in Star Trek. Who got a 1 out of 3? Oh, that he got. Okay, they're both good though. They're both good. Did it have a 3-breasted Troy? So this is a question from Win Grace about the TNG Bible. Did they have a 3-breasted Troy, or had they edited that idea out by then? I don't remember reading anything about that. So I do remember reading that Troy and Riker used to date, and they would be on the same ship, and they would definitely not have any romantic relationship with one another for professional reasons or something like that. That's what I remember. I feel like a 3-breasted Troy would stick out in the mind, but I could have missed it. I'm also glad they didn't do that. I agree with you, Nadia. Fascination. That was the name of it. Oh gosh, I would have never guessed that. I would have never guessed that. The Enterprise has to have a bowling alley somewhere. Have we seen one yet on any of these shows? I feel like we have to have. I don't remember it, but that seems like a thing that they would definitely have. Okay, well, that is it for today. That's it for my double take. If you have any other episodes that you think of, I have another one I'm going to do. I'm going to say I'm going to do it next week. We're going to see what happens next week. But if you have any other episodes that you've noticed are copy and pasted from one show to the next for Trek, definitely let me know, or for non-Trek, for other sci-fi things. And we can add it to the series and keep it going. Thank you so much for coming. For those of you who came live, thank you so much to those of you who are watching on the replay. And with that, I'll see you next time. Bye.